Hi, Dylan. It's good to see you. How are you doing?
Hey, Mark. It's a beautiful Monday morning here. Glad to be speaking with you.
Fantastic. Dylan, you're the primary analyst for the new ESG publication and scoring report, which is nearing completion. I thought it'd be a good idea to catch up with you quick to get a brief understanding of the quadrant part of the report. Um, can you tell us how should a reader think about these quadrants and how are they categorized?
Great question, Mark. So in this year's report, we have three quadrants. The first quadrant focuses on ESG data feeds, the second on ESG scoring products, and the last quadrant is a new one we introduced, which is concentrating on ESG data management software. Um, and so across these three quadrants, we had 35 vendors in total feature. Um, and Not most vendors do not feature in all quadrants. The last quadrant is the newest, so a bit smaller. But essentially, what we were trying to do here is cover from end to end data sourcing and processing, data transformation to scoring products, and ultimately now the software that you can use to ingest ESG data feeds from multiple vendors to consolidate them and analyze them, and then also do some regulatory reporting and performance reporting to investors. So really, we're covering the full life cycle of how ESG data is managed across the investment management life cycle.
Okay, all right. And what has changed from last year?
Awesome, that's a great question. So I think a few things have changed from last year. So the biggest and most obvious change is that we've gone from having a single quadrant focused on data and scoring solutions together to breaking out those two quadrants and adding in a quadrant on data management. So when I say we're breaking out the quadrants on ESG data and scoring into two quadrants, what I mean is that we've basically taken some of the aspects of the last year's quadrant revolving around how data is sourced, processed, transformed, and quality is controlled for data. And we've moved those into an ESG data quadrant to just rank vendors on those aspects, basically on their processes and methodologies. And then we've introduced another quadrant to focus predominantly on breadth of scoring products and the explainability and performance attribution of those scoring products. Um, and so we think it's a nice balance because you're actually able to separate out these two elements, and they are oftentimes, in many cases, distinct from one another, especially as you look at certain companies. And then we also introduced the ESG data management quadrant, which I can talk more about in later in this conversation. Um, so as you might imagine, with introducing three quadrants, the performance of the different vendors in the quadrants has shifted a bit since last year's report, and that will be reflected in the scoring. And lastly, this year we introduced a more refined market potential methodology, which we think is more reflective of the realities in the market.
Okay, thank you. I guess that leads me to the next question then. Could you give a bit more detail on how vendors are ranked or scored?
Of course. So let's start with the ESG data quadrant. So for this quadrant, we had six completeness of offering scoring criteria. These were breadth of entity coverage, framework support, ESG metrics breadth, data transformation techniques, data sourcing, and roadmap and strategy. And it's important to recognize that for each of these aspects, we took a look at the submissions and publicly available information for the vendors that we scored, and we basically rated them on each of these aspects according to a number of discrete criteria that we were looking for that were sort of listed within the RFI for this report. And so what we found was that vendors that had the covered the most types of assets, which adhere to a number of the different sustainability regulations and voluntary frameworks, and ultimately which also had advanced in approaches in natural language processing and data transformation, as well as in data sourcing, where they're acquiring data from, and then ultimately how they're structuring their data models so that the most information is revealed to the user. Those were the things we were really looking at, and these are where vendors that did these things well shine in this report. Lastly, we also introduced a roadmap and strategy component to this report to sort of provide a lens into the differentiation of a given vendor's approach to data, since ultimately uniqueness is an interesting factor that does have some import in ESG data. And we think that ESG data is going to be the heart of this market in the future. Currently, the heart of the market is the scoring aspect, so we'll get to that in a second. But so we wanted to provide a view on how different firms are tracking to sort of provide a unique value proposition in the market. On the ESG scoring quadrant, we looked at a fewer number of factors. We looked at entity support, breadth of products offered, depth of score granularity, score transparency and assurance, and modeling and visualization. And of these, I want to call out two of them, which were sort of the breadth of products offered. We've sort of benchmarked the array of ESG scoring products that are available in the market, and we analyzed each vendor along the lines of how many of these do they provide, and how complete are their offerings in these areas by creating some sort of best of breed metrics for each of these. And on the score transparency and assurance side, we took a detailed look at the scoring methodologies of each of the vendors that offer ESG ratings, and we analyzed them across a few variables to communicate to the market how well explained and well defended are these scores, and are there any potential quality control concerns that someone might have when reviewing a score. Lastly, we looked at, in the ESG data management quadrant, we looked at really high-level capabilities. This is our first year doing this quadrant, so we didn't want to overstate our analysis. So essentially what we have here is a list of the 6 different things that we are looking at as software components in this emerging software stack, which include reference data management, self-service ESG data aggregation, consensus scoring, which is a view of how the market sees an ESG investment, composite scoring, which is doing your own slice and dice of data and combining different data sets to create your own scores, regulatory data management reporting, and lastly, portfolio performance reporting. And so in this quadrant, we took a heuristic look at the capabilities of various vendors in each of these areas, and we hope to invest greater into this quadrant in the next cycle, and to produce a much deeper view as we develop our view on this topic.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess we're coming to the end, so let me just ask you quickly, what are the key takeaways from quadrants that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So 3 I want to call out by quadrant, I think, where vendors have shined. So I think on the ESG data quadrant, the vendors that are investing heavily in advancements in automation are best positioned to compete now and in the future. We think that automation is an important aspect, considering that ESG data sets are really a function of how many sources can you ingest, how much information, what breadth of information can you obtain from those sources, and ultimately how quickly can you deliver it to the user. And automation fits in as a key aspect in all these different steps. In the ESG scoring quadrant, transparency really sits at the heart of this, where investors are asking hard-hitting questions about the market, and they really want to see that ratings are well thought out, that they're unbiased, and that they can communicate something very clear to the user of that rating. And lastly, ESG data management is an emergent area, but the firms that offer the largest breadth of capabilities and with some consideration and depth of functionality behind those capabilities, we're best positioned to compete. Granted, all these quadrants are a little bit in flux, but we do see the ESG data quadrant as being an indicator of where the market is going, and we hope that our readers will look at this the same way.
Excellent. Well, Dylan, thank you very much for this brief overview. I look forward to seeing the report when it comes out, which I'm sure that our viewers also look forward to it. So thank you very much once again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.